Hello, welcome back to another video. Now today I'm going to talk about layering. So I've just finished the Dales Divide event. It was about 10 days ago now, and I got quite a lot of questions about the kit I was wearing, the different layers. The weather was really bad at times. There was a massive storm. It was also quite warm at times and also just cold. So it was quite varied conditions. So I thought what I'd do is I'd talk about the way I layer for ultra races, and I'd use Dales Divide as a bit of an example. And I'll talk you through the race and talk you through the layers I used, when I used them and why I used them. So as you can see, I'm sat here in the base layer. It's not my normal fashion, but I thought I'd start at the base. So yeah, basically I was running these Albion pocket bib shorts for the start and leg warmers, and then I had a base layer. So I am supported by Albion, so a lot of the kit you see in this video is going to be Albion gear, but there's also stuff that I buy from other brands as well, just because it works really well. And for me, base layers, I really like merino base layers, but I find the standard merino, i.e. not a mesh one, I find it gets a bit kind of heavy with sweat sometimes. So I like the kind of like the halfway house of having a merino mesh base layer. This one's from Rafa. It's a bit threadbare. I've had it for a long time. It's done pretty much most of my races over the last few years. I should probably buy a new one. But yeah, I find this works really well when you know that the conditions are going to be changeable and there's going to be kind of, especially when it's raining. I think merino is really good. So yeah, I tend to buy these Rafa merino mesh base layers. So that's what I started with. And then the next layer on top, I used this. So this is the Albion Traverse jersey. And as you can see, it's a long sleeve jersey. So my choice before the start was, would I wear the long sleeve jersey or a standard jersey and arm warmers? And I made that call on the morning of the race, and the weather was pretty grim, pretty cold. The temperature wasn't really going to be going above 10 degrees. So I went for the long sleeve jersey over the arm warmers and the normal jersey. So yeah, so this is essentially the kind of the platform upon which I built my layering system. And this was the kit I was going to be wearing all the time. Now, if you don't know much about the Dales Divide, well, I did it in about 40 hours. So the front sort of 10 or 15 riders tend to ride through the night in one hit, which is what I did. Other people tend to stop and do it over 2, 3, maybe even 4 days. So they'd probably need to carry a few more additional items, but I'll get onto that in a while. But this is essentially the riding gear. So as I said, I checked the forecast before I started, went for the long sleeve jersey, and I know that at the start of the races you always end up going a bit harder, and therefore you generate a bit more heat. It wasn't actually raining on the start line, however it was forecast to rain within the first sort of couple of hours of the event, and there was a pretty sort of wild storm front coming through, and it was quite windy as well. So essentially I just decided to run with my rain jacket over the top. So this is the Albion Zoa rain shell, and yeah, this is what I started the race in. So it kept the worst of the wind off. It kept me warm. I was a little bit hot on some of the climbs, but then you soon cooled off on the descents. So basically I just managed the heat with the zipping it up and down as required. And yeah, and then when it started getting a little bit wild, you could zip up the collar. So you could put that up over your face, and that stopped the worst of the rain kind of driving into your face. So that was kind of the body and the bulk of the layering. And then hands, feet and head, again, they're another little kind of layering system that you can adapt depending on the conditions. So my main layering system on my body was the rain jacket to start with. And then on my head, I just used one of these little Albion rain caps. And I quite like these. These are made with Pertex Equilibrium fabric. So it's a bit thinner than your traditional cotton cycling cap, so it fits under a helmet quite well. And I tend to wear these backwards, mainly because when you're on a drop bar bike, I find the peak gets in the way a little bit, and also have the hood as well in case I needed to sort of get that extra protection. So yeah, I put that on and then it fits under my helmet. Incidentally, the helmet I was using was this POC Cytal. Now it's kind of an aero helmet, but the main benefit for me for this event wasn't the fact that it's aero, it's the fact that there's less holes in it. So there's less places for the rain to get in and the wind to get in. And I think it just keeps you a little bit warmer. So basically I had this over the top of the hat. And then as and when the weather got really wild, or for example on the descent, I could put the hood up over the top and zip it up, and as you can see, it pulls the collar quite high up over my cheeks, and that was really good for stopping the wind and the rain pushing sort of into my face. So yeah, so that was how I basically went for the first, well, probably most of the first day until basically got through the Dales the first time. Feet, I'm wearing these Canyon Scamper trail shoes, which I discovered last year. They're really, really comfortable. They're good to walk in. They're fairly stiff, but not too stiff, because I do find if I use too stiff a shoe for one of these races, your feet can pay over time. So yeah, they work really well. And I started in these Albion Zoa Merino socks. They're a bit thicker. I knew I was going to get wet feet, and so I thought I'd go for the merino sock, and yeah, it worked pretty well. I didn't get cold feet. So yeah, I had one of those, started with one of them. I also had a spare set as well, so I knew that I'd have wet feet and I might want to change at a later date, which I did later in the race. On my hands, I decided to run these pot gloves. So you'll probably see me using these orange pot gloves on a lot of the races I did last year. I used the mitts quite a lot last year, but these are the sort of mountain bike version. I quite like them because they've got like a fairly minimal pad in the center, but I find it stops, it's quite effective for stopping me getting numb hands. So I had these on, and my plan was, I think, like I'm talking about layering with the body, layering with your hands is also a really good tactic. So I wore these knowing that I'd be going quite hard. Obviously hands would be quite warm. It was also a tailwind predominantly in the start. If it was a headwind, I probably would have worn warmer gloves, because the wind tends to sort of freeze your hands when they're wet. But as it was a tailwind, the hands weren't getting so much, sort of blasted so much by the wind. So I wore these, and my plan was, if I needed to, was just to chuck my waterproof mitts. These are Sportful mitts. Just chuck them over the top if needed, and I find then you have quite a warm and waterproof glove. Obviously the mitt keeps the rain from getting your hands wet and blocks the wind, and also because they're slightly baggy and you've got kind of a layer underneath, it traps the heat, so they actually get like warmer than you'd think for kind of the thickness. As it was, I didn't need to use those at that stage, but they did come in useful later on. So that's pretty much what I was wearing the first part of the day. So we're talking sort of probably 7 to 10 degrees, very windy, rain coming in and out. When you were going into a headwind and it was raining, it was pretty brutal, to be honest. The hood was up, I was zipped up, on the limit of being warm, but because I was moving all the time, I did keep warm. And incidentally, you know, I was drinking quite a lot, eating quite a lot. I used the Talk stuff, so I had a lot of the Talk gels and stuff, just for that quick energy. And I think eating a lot is very important when it's that wet weather, because being cold just burns energy. So yeah, it's all kind of a number of things you need to think about. But getting into the evening, we started dropping out of the Dales and things started warming up. Yeah, so as things started warming up in the evening and we dropped out of the Dales, there's a long flat section basically between the edge of the Yorkshire Dales and then you go to the Yorkshire Wolds through York. It's quite flat, much lower down, so the wind wasn't so much of a factor, and this jacket was getting quite warm, so effectively I could do a quick change, take it off. I had been soaked all day, so invariably the inner layers were wet, whether it was with sweat or rain or a combination of both. It didn't really matter, it's still quite wet. So what I tend to use then is the gilet, so I could do a quick swap in like 30 seconds, just changing layers on the bike. So then I put the gilet on. This is the Albion, again, an Albion Pertex gilet. And I find, I'm a big fan of gilets, because I find they keep a lot of heat in the body, they keep the wind off, but then you just have a bit more breathability in your arms. And yeah, this was fine as the evening started kind of drawing in, but you know when it's clear, and you know it's only sort of 10 degrees in the day, it is going to get colder at night. So effectively, I waited until my first kind of resupply in Boroughbridge, and I knew at that point I was going to stop. I needed to change my brake pads, I needed to buy a load of food to get me through the night, and my plan was at that point to have a real change of kind of or layers, or start, you know, a slightly different system. So yeah, I stopped at Boroughbridge, and it was getting colder, and obviously when you stop your body cools down a bit. You don't always warm up to the same temperature. So once I stopped, you can see in the video I made of it, I had a new layer on after that, one that I hadn't had before. So that was this, which is the Albion ultralight insulated jacket. Now these are really great. I use it quite a lot just in general riding. You can crunch them up, they're less than 100 grams, you can put them in a back pocket, no problems. And this is good, as long as you're moving, it's good. It's not so good at super high intensities, but for a bike packing race, it's good because you're not going that hard. And basically, the idea of this layer is, it just stops the wind. So it stops the wind, it's got a bit more insulation on the arms. And as I went into the night, the temperatures were cooling. I put this on basically just before dusk. And this kept me warm most of the night, probably until kind of the early hours. So I rode all the way to Scarborough with this setup. I still had my mitts on. By this point, I had put a neck warmer on as well. So I was pulling this up over my mouth. And yeah, that was perfect kind of layering for that time of night. So as I reached the coast, I got to Scarborough about 2 AM, which is basically the sort of almost the halfway point, about halfway. And you know, 2 AM, the heat of the day's going. It was a lovely clear night, the moon was up, but it was getting colder. And I wasn't cold, but I was beginning to feel it a little bit. So I basically had another quick stop, just changed some layers. So I changed these gloves off because they weren't really warm enough anymore, and I'm one of those people that I'd rather keep my hands really warm than let them get cold. And I took the ultralight insulate jersey off. Well, I'll put it back on again in a second, but I'll show you the layering system I used. And then basically I added in a warmer layer. So I also took off the hat because I didn't need it for the next layer. And I added this. So this is the active insulation layer from Albion. So as you can see, it's kind of like a meshy, sort of fleecy type material. So I chucked this on over the top, and I'm a big fan of this layer. I used it a lot last year. I used it at the Silk Road Mountain Race and the Alps Divide. It's really versatile. So basically, this was the layer I was going to put on overnight. And the good thing about this is it's really flexible. You don't sweat too much in it because it breathes, and you can layer over the top if you want to increase the warmth, which is what I ended up doing. And also it's got the hood as well. So I put the hood up, and that was just keeping my head and my neck nice and warm, just trapping all that heat in there so that I wasn't losing too much heat unnecessarily. So once I had the hoodie on, I could put the helmet over the top, and that was me essentially nice and warm. And then basically I just put the insulated layer back over the top again just to trap the heat. And the great thing about using this active layer in conjunction with the insulated layer, effectively this is a wind stopper with a bit of extra insulation, and that means that the air gets trapped underneath, and because you've got the insulation in there, there's a really warm layer of air. So I was able to ride through the night without any problems, and it was below freezing on the Yorkshire moors in the morning when dawn came up. It was really was beautiful, but there was frost on the ground. It was obviously pretty cold. So yeah, that was more than enough. When you're riding, it's fine. However, what I would say is if you were going to stop, you probably would get cold quite quickly. I didn't really give myself the option to stop. I had a time scale I had in mind. So therefore I didn't really pack any kind of bigger insulated layers. If I was doing another event, which was longer, or for example, I was going to do it over 3 or 4 days, I would probably also put a down jacket in just to keep me warm off the bike. But basically I committed to going non-stop, so I packed accordingly. On my gloves, I use these, you've seen these a lot if you've seen any of my other bike checks. These are Polartec active gloves from Pedaled. Again, they use a very similar material to the active hoodie. It's basically Polartec's version, and I just find these are really good. Weight to kind of warmth is excellent, as long as they don't get wet. So I was riding these through the night just to keep the hands warm, and yeah, there was no real problems, and yeah, got through into the dawn. And yeah, basically I rode this most of the day as I headed back towards the Dales. The wind was picking up a bit, it was a bit more of a headwind, but most of the morning I kind of rode like this, and then I think I switched back to the other gloves as my hands were getting warmer, and then eventually I kind of gradually sort of unpeeled all the layers. So I took off this, and then I was riding in my kind of active hoodie. Eventually it was getting warmer and warmer, so I just took the hood off underneath the helmet. Again, that just gives you some more airflow, and then you can quite easily you know, cool down a bit by just pulling the sleeves up. And then I think eventually I ended up just in the gilet again as I headed towards my second resupply and the climb up into the Dales. So yeah, then I did another costume change. So yeah, around lunchtime, I think 1 or 2 o'clock, I did my second resupply, and I did another bit of a change as well. It was basically, there was a big storm coming in, which was forecast and knew about, called Storm Dave. It was quite a big one. So basically I wanted to get as far as I could before it came in, but there was a few kind of showers and stuff. So I ended up going back to kind of essentially what I started in. So I had the cap on, had that backwards, under the cycling helmet. So that was there. And then I got hit by a few showers. So I did have my rain jacket on again. So I had this on. And then at times I also had my gilet underneath it. But yeah, the wind was getting quite cold. So this was basically either stopping me getting wet or a windbreak. Luckily the rain wasn't too intense. There was a couple of sort of 20-minute showers. But by this point the storm was coming in, so it was getting really windy. But I was able to kind of ride, you know, in this gear pretty comfortably. Again, if you're moving, it's okay, you're generating your own heat. But I kind of knew what was coming. You could see the clouds building. The forecast suggested that this big storm was going to come in. And I still had to get over the Cam High Road, which is kind of the last big kind of high section before you sort of drop down and do the final kind of like 30 miles or so into the finish. And as I was climbing up, basically got to the top and the gale force wind started. So I was still wrapped up like this, and basically I just wanted to get as far as I could before the storm hit properly. So that meant when it did start raining, I was essentially just pushing on a little bit, taking some risks a little bit. I mean, I didn't stop to put any more warm layers on, but I had my hood up. You know, I was properly zipped up and just trying to keep moving to keep the heat in there. As I started descending, the rain came in and it just started bucketing down. And yeah, I was starting to get cold, and that's where I kind of like pulled the emergency kind of layers button, and I put my rain trousers on. So these are the Albion Zoa rain trousers, and yeah, basically I put these on. So then I was kind of going downhill, fully waterproofed on. Like I probably needed an extra layer underneath my jacket by that point, but there was just no way I was going to stop. Like the hood was up, I was tucked in, and if I'd have stopped to take layers off, I would have got totally smashed. So by that point, I still had these gloves on. My hands were wet, they were starting to get cold. So I put the trousers on, and then I also just put the mitts on as well. And basically this is what I rode the storm out in, or the worst of the storm, like the first front of it. And it was wild, it really was quite wild. Yeah, the storm was really wild. I got down off the high ground. I can't remember what the town is at the bottom there. And I just remember like cowering in a doorway on the limit basically. And you know, I'm wearing all this gear and I'm pretty much soaked through, and I just needed to get warm and just get done. I just wanted to be done by that point. So what I did was, yeah, I stopped, and I basically was shivering by this point, soaking wet, but I knew I had to get some layers off. So I took my rain jacket off, and obviously it was getting a bit colder. I think I had my gilet on at the same time. That was absolutely drenched. So I took the gilet off, and then I just went for full maximal warmth. So I put I put this back on, the active layer. So that went over the top, and you can squeeze that over a helmet, so that wasn't too much of an issue. So I had that on, and then obviously this was dry. I managed to keep this dry because this was in my tailfin pack. I had the hood up, took this hat off because this hat was soaking wet. So yeah, just trying to get the wet layers off, get dry stuff on. I put the hood back up, helmet back on over the top, and then I went for the insulated jacket over the top of that. So yeah, by this point, yeah, it made a real difference. I was really amazed how quickly I warmed up from like, I wasn't on the edge of hypothermia, but it could have gone one way or the other. I put this back on, and then I put my rain jacket back on over the top of all of that. So I had my rain jacket on as well. I had the hood up. Bearing in mind it was still on and off raining, howling a gale, but by this point we were lower down, so we were a bit more sheltered. But every now and again you just got absolutely smashed by the wind. And then with my gloves I put the mitts back on over the top. And yeah, within like 10 minutes I was absolutely sweltering, like I had too much on. So I ended up taking the mitts off, unzipping everything. I think I took the hood off on my rain jacket, and essentially that's what I rode into the finish with, and I finished about midnight. So yeah, the layers worked really well. I never got over cold, or when I did get cold, I was always able to warm up again, which was really good. And I even had a few layers left over. So the layers that I didn't use, I had a spare pair of Zoa socks. I changed them halfway. So I did change them just to have dry feet halfway going into the night, which was good. And then I did actually have some more socks as well. So these are some POC lightweight merino socks, which I find are quite good. I've used them for years. It's amazing how long they've lasted. And then also some Altura, they're quite light waterproof socks. So this was going to be my absolute extreme torrential layers. If my feet were getting cold, I was going to put these on. I kept these dry in a dry bag. I was going to put the Altura socks on over the top. And then I was just going to basically be wearing everything I had. And then I had some dry gloves as well. So I just had some mitts. So my absolute extreme cold hand scenario, I would have put these POC mitts on, mainly just for the padding on the palms. I would have put my pedal leg gloves on over the top, and then I probably would put my rain mitts over the top of that. Thankfully it didn't come to that, because if it comes to that, it means it's really cold and really wet and really miserable. But yeah, I got through it. It was a good event, not without its challenges. So yeah, so that is basically the layering system that I used, and this is very similar on most of the events I do. So I could use this, I think, for the Silk Road Mountain race, for example, or one of those more extreme races. I think this would work for riding layers, although you then need to take extra layers for keeping warm off the bike potentially, or a second pair of shorts and things like that. So yeah, but this is a really good basis. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope it was really useful. Put any questions down below. Don't forget to check out Albion. I'll put the link on screen. I've got a bit of a discount if you like the look of any of their kits. And yeah, see you in the next one.